What's up guys, it's Gone, and today we'll be doing an overview of the terrific rebuild of the Baltimore Orioles. Until the salary issues are fixed, it has become increasingly clear that there are basically just two ways to be consistently competitive. The first one is to spend a lot of money, although teams are beginning to prove that even that way is becoming less effective. And the second way is to do a deep rebuild and come out the other end a better team. Within the last decade, the Astros, Cubs, and Nationals all ended up winning the World Series off the backs of their draft picks, and now the Orioles are looking to follow in their footsteps. With a league best farm system and one of the best major league teams to boot, the Orioles are not only looking to contend for a World Series right now, but also have the ammunition to be one of the best teams to compete for a World Series down the line. This video will look at the drafting that ultimately led to the Orioles' ultimate rebuild, and what other teams can expect when approaching a rebuild of their own. But before we get onto the video, could you guys please hit the like and subscribe button? Currently, only 3% of people who watch my videos are subscribed, so if y'all do, not only would it help me grow my channel, but it also would encourage me to create more videos like this one for you guys. And without further ado, let's get on to the video. We'll start with the 2016 season because this really was the turning point in the Orioles franchise. Ultimately, this was the last season of their contention window, where they would end up making the playoffs 3 times over the span of 5 years, and they would ultimately get bounced in the one-game wildcard. However, at the time, many Orioles fans would think of this season as the beginning of something excellent, or at least very good. They were led by 23-year-old third baseman Manny Machado, who posted a 7.3 WAR season en route to finishing 5th in MVP voting in his 5th MLB season. Chris Davis hit 38 home runs and had been locked up by the club for the next 6 years, and they had more young players sprinkled throughout the lineup in rotation, including slick fielding middle infielder Jonathan Scope and potential future co-aces in Kevin Gausman and Dylan Bundy. However, the part that the Orioles fans may remember most about this team was the bullpen, and oh boy was that bullpen historically good. Zach Britton may have had the best season by reliever of all time, and definitely the best since Eric Gagne, finishing 4th in Cy Young voting that year. But their entire bullpen was solid, including Brad Brock, who appeared 71 times to a 210 ERA+, Darren O'Day, who pitched to a 115 ERA+, and a young Michael Gibbons, who posted a 138 ERA+. Ultimately, though, their bullpen was the catalyst to an overall solid team to turn into a great team that would make the playoffs as a second wildcard slot. However, perhaps infamously, they would lose to the Blue Jays in extras on a walk-off home run by Edwin Encarnacion from Ubaldo Jimenez, with Zach Britton never having thrown a single pitch in the game. But, decisions aside, this team was big picture very good, and Orioles fans had a lot to be excited over the team control they had over many of their cornerstone players. During this year's draft, they would select right-hand pitcher Cody Setlock in hopes of bolstering one of the league's worst farm systems at the time. And besides the drafting of Austin Hayes in the 3rd round, this draft would ultimately be very underwhelming for an Orioles team that would desperately need some organizational talent to be sustainably competitive. And the 2016-2017 offseason would be relatively quiet for the club. They would end up having a couple of key free agents but would ultimately re-sign them, including Michael Bourne and all-star Mark Trumbo. They would also end up acquiring Anthony Santander in the 2016 Rule 5 draft, and although he would provide very little for the upcoming season, Santander has been a valuable contributor for the Orioles as a switching outfielder these past couple of years. However, one player they would love to have back would have been 25-year-old first baseman Christian Walker. Due to the logjam at first base with Chris Davis and Trey Mancini, Christian Walker was ultimately DFA'd and claimed by the Braves, where he would eventually end up with the Diamondbacks as a very solid player for them, someone the Orioles would definitely love to have back, especially during their lean years. However, the 2017 season started off on a very bright note, with the team winning 22 of their first 32 games. Yet, looking at their run, it was unsustainable. Neither their pitching or their lineup had been exceptionally good, and they were winning a lot of close games, going 7-1 in one-run games and 16-3 in games decided by 2 runs or less. And all that luck came crashing down just like that, as the team would end up losing their next 4 games, all by 1 run. This team was incredibly hot and cold, with 5 streaks of 5 losses or more, offsetting a 29-20 run through the months of July and August. Ultimately, it would be their 7-21 month of September that would be their doom, and put the team in an interesting spot going forward. Basically, everything that caused the team to be successful in 2016 would be their downfall in 2017. Manny Machado, at one point looking like the future face of the entire league, took a small step back in his age 24 season, only posting a 108 OPS+, although he still did hit 33 home runs, and their rotation of the young future stars also regressed, with Gausman's ERA going up to 4.68 and Bundy's to 4.24. However, their once elite-level bullpen turned into just good, possibly being the deciding factor that led to an underwhelming 75-87 season. Britton, at one point the potential face of the entire Orioles franchise, had multiple injuries that led to only 37 and a third innings of 2.87 ERA ball. Good, but not historically great. And although Brad Brock and Michael Gibbons flourished under their increased workload, ultimately, regressions and injuries were the standard for the Orioles, who would end up missing the playoffs despite promising contributions from 25-year-olds Jonathan Schoop and Trey Mancini, giving Orioles fans hope for the future amidst this disappointing season. However, despite going 75-87, the Orioles were still in the hunt going into the 2017 trade deadline, where they would end up making a couple of big trades. The first one was with the Rays for Tim Beckham, with Beckham being the catalyst for the O's run in July and August, as he posted a 132 OPS plus in 50 games for the team. The next trade would be with the Phillies for Jeremy Hellickson, in which Hellickson pitched to an ERA close to 7 in his time with the Orioles. This trade could have been a disaster if the prospects had turned out, in which Garrett Clevenger is the only real player of note from these two trades as a solid relief arm. And speaking of arms, in the 2017 MLB draft, the Orioles would draft lefty DL Hall in the 2017 draft, with no real solid contributors along with him. And with question marks surrounding this team going into the 2017-2018 offseason, management ultimately decided to run it back, with the small additions of Andrew Kashner and the less small addition of Alex Cobb. The hope here was that, with the same squad, maybe they'd catch more of those hot streaks rather than the cold streaks that always seem to happen. And well, 2018 was kind of like the 2017 season, if it was always just the cold streaks. The Orioles lost a franchise-worst 115 games en route to being the worst team in baseball by a pretty large margin. Tim Beckham, the utility man that sparked the Orioles' run last year, regressed heavily back to the mean with an 81 OPS plus, and Chris Davis, who already regressed a fair amount into the 2017 season, looked borderline unplayable for the majority of the season, batting 168 and only slugging 296. However, the pitching was the real eyesore. Kevin Gausman was the only pitcher with an ERA under 4.5, and he didn't even pitch the entire season. Their bullpen, once a real strength of the team, had turned into well below average. There was no real surprise when the Orioles fired Buck Showalter and GM Dan Duquette after managing 8 years for the team after this one, hiring Brandon Hyde and Mike Elias shortly after to oversee what could be a long rebuild. During the disappointing season, they would end up trading franchise cornerstone Manny Machado at the trade deadline, who was on the last year of his contract, for right-hand pitcher Dean Kramer, outfielder Yasnel Diaz, second baseman Breivik Valera, and third baseman Ryan Lynn Brannon, officially kicking off their rebuild. 6 days later, they would trade the other face of their franchise, Zach Britton, to their hated division rival Yankees for pitchers Dylan Tate, Josh Rogers, and Cody Carroll. They would also make a couple of trades on trade deadline day, trading Jonathan Schoop to the Brewers for Jonathan Villar, Luis Ortiz, and Gene Carmona, as well as Kevin Gausman and Darren O'Day for Evan Phillips, Giancarlos Encarnacion, and Bruce Zimmerman. Although it was definitely a gut punch to Orioles fans, having to see all of the faces of their franchise for such a long time go in such a short period of time, these trades ultimately did boost their rebuild, giving them many players that played crucial roles to where this team is today. And with these trades, many now considered what was once a league-worst farm system to turn into one of the better ones, only bolstered by a strong 2018 draft that mainly saw them select right-hand pitcher Grayson Rodriguez. In fact, the selection of Grayson Rodriguez was extremely smart by the Orioles given their timeline. Talent-wise, Rodriguez was likely a top 5 player in the draft, but teams were likely turned off given the long timetable for a major league call-up and the risk of injury associated with him. However, the Orioles, knowing that they are a long ways away according to their rebuild, select a talent that has the means to single-handedly carry a franchise out of their rebuild, giving him the time and patience he needs to develop along the way. And with a long rebuild in the books, the Orioles saw an uneventful 2018-2019 offseason, although they did see longtime outfielder Adam Jones leave in free agency. This should be the norm for any rebuilding team. Sign rentals if you need to, for hopes of trading them at the trade deadline, but the main goal should be to develop what young major league talent you have, supplementing them with more prospects along the way. The Orioles are simply playing by the book here with their rebuild. And the 2019 season saw more of the same, with the Orioles only winning a third of their games throughout the season. Thankfully for Orioles fans, though, there were some bright spots and improvements. Amidst back-to-back seasons of regression, Jonathan Villar, who was acquired in the Jonathan Schoop trade and had a good half season with them last year, blossomed in 2019. Anthony Santander progressed in his first season of real playing time, and Trey Mancini posted a 35 home run, 132 OPS plus season to join VR as faces of a young franchise. And on the pitching side, John Means became an Orioles de facto ace, posting an ERA of 3.6 in 155 innings, and Dylan Bundy had a small bounce back, now being around league average. Also in the rotation, Andrew Cashner pitched well enough for him to be shipped to the Red Sox for center fielder Elio Prado and shortstop Noel Beth Romero. However, the real improvement that would have to come would be down on the farm, which was now bolstered by a healthy amount of trades and drafted players. Yunel Diaz, Dean Kramer, Grayson Rodriguez, D.L. Hall, Austin Hayes, and Ryan Mountcastle all took steps forward in their development, with Hayes and Mountcastle making serious pushes toward contributions into the 2020 season. They were also able to get potentially one of the best number 1 draft picks in recent history with catcher Adley Rutschman, with their first overall pick in the 2019 MLB draft, and with their second round pick, they selected Gunnar Henderson. They would also end up selecting Kyle Stowers, Joey Ortiz, and Darrell Hernaiz in this draft as well, adding to the depth of their farm. The 2019-2020 offseason saw the Orioles make a few key moves. For starters, they continued to go younger, now trading the aging Dylan Bundy to the Angels for 4 pitchers, Isaac Matson, Kyle Bradish, Zach Peak, and Kyle Brnovich. They would also take Ramon Urias off waivers from the Cardinals and sign Jose Iglesias to a 2-year deal worth $6 million. These contributions all added in the 2020 season, and the lack of a minor league season definitely stunted the development of a lot of the Orioles prospects. And while some rebounded from that, others never improved, like longtime Orioles top prospect Yusniel Diaz. Nonetheless, this was another year of just seeing what the young players could do, and trading away the aging players for more talent. Once again, young players joined and impressed. Ryan Mountcastle posted an OPS plus of 137 in his first season, and Anthony Santander looked like one of the best players on the team, with an OPS plus of 135. Jose Iglesias, signed for just $3 million a year, hit 373, 400, 556 in 30 games with the club, en route to having his best season in his career, albeit in a very short sample size. And Cedric Mullins, now a full-time left-handed hitter, began to pick up his career. However, John Means took a step back in the shortened season, and the pitching and lack of lineup consistency caused the Orioles to eventually finish 25-35, with the trades of Miguel Castro and Michael Gibbons capping off the end to a disappointing season. However, the Orioles continued to improve their farm system despite no minor league season. Top prospects like Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, and Grayson Rodriguez all got live reps against each other at the O's alternate training site. And as iron sharpens iron, the elite level talent that all the O's prospects had definitely made them all a little bit better. A huge advantage over those with lesser farm systems. To add to that elite farm system in the 2020 draft, where everyone just seemed to be throwing at darts with no collegiate baseball season, the O's came out a little bit better than most, selecting outfielder Heston Kierstead and second baseman Jordan Westberg in the draft. Going into the 2020-2021 offseason, there was definitely some optimism about how the end of the Orioles rebuild might happen right then and there. After all, after so many years of high-end draft picks and trades for young players, many outlets had the Orioles as a top 5 farm system in the game. And to add further excitement, many of those players were just a year or two away, and they already had contributing rookies and young stars like Jonathan Villar, Anthony Santander, and Ryan Mountcastle. However, while lesser teams would have capitalized on this young talent on a whim, trading valuable assets for the chance of competing sooner, Orioles brass stayed put, making 2 trades with the Angels to sell high on overperforming veterans for more young talent. The 2021 season started out great. Trey Mancini, who had been sidelined battling colon cancer throughout 2020, made his triumphant return on opening day 2021. They would also end up sweeping the Red Sox in that series, starting the season 3-0. But ultimately, this would prove to be another development year for the club, as multiple 10-game losing streaks or more would become all too frequent. At this point, it became clear that the Orioles at the time simply did not have the talent on the major league roster to compete at a high level. Sure, the Orioles had a few pieces. Cedric Mullins hit 30 home runs and stole 30 bases in his breakout campaign. Ryan Mountcastle built on a strong rookie campaign by hitting 33 home runs. Waiver claim Jorge Mateo impressed, and Trey Mancini returned to being a valuable contributor. But when John Means is your only reliable starter and more than half your rotation has an ERA over 6, then there's no wonder why this team won only 52 games. There was not even any real major league talent to sell off during the trade deadline, with only one minor trade of Freddie Galvis to the Phillies. However, to cap off this season, a walk-off home run by Stuart Fairchild and the Diamondbacks would end up giving them the first overall pick, a fitting prize for a miserable season. And thankfully, juxtaposing the Major League's inept play was the overall breakout of this team's farm system. Outside of Yunel Diaz, everyone picked up right where they left off following the cancellation of the minor leagues in 2020. Adley Rutschman hit .285, .397, .502 for an .899 OPS across Double and Triple-A to look like one of, if not the top prospect in all of baseball. Gunnar Henderson hit 17 home runs in 105 games, moving all the way up to Double-A at 20 years old. Jordan Westberg had an .868 OPS, also moving up to Double-A, and pitchers Grayson Rodriguez and Kyle Bradish both pitched over 100 innings, posting ERAs under 4 with a lot of strikeouts. To add to this, the Orioles would select Colton Cowser with the 5th overall pick and Connor Norby with their 2nd round pick. Orioles fans had a lot to be excited about going into 2022, especially surrounding top prospect Adley Rutschman. Following another quiet offseason highlighted by a one-year deal of Rougned Odor, the 2022 season began, where we really began to see what this team could do when it was all put together. It would be easy to say that Adley Rutschman was the major difference. He had a terrific season, posting a 132 OPS plus as a catcher with stellar defense, and the team did go 67-54 following his call-up, but the team in its entirety really did improve. Cedric Mullins returned to the standard offensively, but was still a great defensive center fielder, and Jorge Mateo looked like a potential stick at the Orioles shortstop, in tandem with third baseman Ramon Arias and Ryan Mountcastle. And most of the infield was set for the time being, especially considering Gunnar Henderson really did impress in his last month of the season. However, the real improvement was the pitching. Despite losing John Means to Tommy John, strides were made in both the rotation and bullpen. Dean Kramer took a huge step forward from his ERA over 6 the past year to post at 3.22 ERA, and Jordan Lyles anchored what was a pretty solid rotation full of young starting pitchers. As for the bullpen, despite trading both Tanner Scott and Cole Sulser to the Marlins, they were frankly elite. Jorge Lopez had an ERA under 2 in 48 innings with the squad, and Dylan Tate, Brian Baker, Cionel Perez, and Keegan Aiken were all solid contributors. And 27-year-old rookie Felix Bautista was promising to begin his major league campaign. This bullpen ended up causing the Orioles to win a ton of close games, and although they would barely miss the playoffs, slumping near the end to finish 83-79, there were a ton of encouraging signs to build on to a potential run in 2023. Perhaps controversially though, they would end up trading their all-star closer Jorge Lopez at the trade deadline to the Twins for pitchers Yennier Cano, Cade Povich, Juan Rojas, and Juan Nunez. This trade would happen in the middle of a 36-17 run, and whether they would have made them playoffs with Lopez on the team or not, you really do have to hand it to the Orioles staff for recognizing that they were ultimately not the right team to win the World Series, and the players that the Twins were giving up would be more helpful than a half season of Lopez in the long run. Ultimately, this trade would end up being a pretty big win for the Orioles, as Cano would turn into a pretty big bullpen piece and Cade Povich is a pretty good prospect at the moment, and Lopez didn't really turn into much as the Twins as he did with the Orioles. Nonetheless, this trade told Orioles fans that they just weren't quite there yet, and they would have to wait for reinforcements to come in their farm system, only bolstered by first overall pick Jackson Holliday, as well as Dylan Beavers, Max Wagner, and Judd Fabian. And with real expectations surrounding this team following the promising 2022 season, they added major pieces for the first time in a long time, although not breaking the bank just yet. They would sign Adam Frazier in free agency and trade for Cole Irvin and Ryan O'Hearn. Orioles fans were expecting to make the playoffs as a wildcard team, but I don't think that even the most optimistic of Orioles fans saw what was coming. This team was just great all around. They won 101 games and had the best record in the American League. Everything clicked. Gunnar Henderson won Rookie of the Year, giving the Orioles another draft pick to play with. Adley Rutschman, Cedric Mullins, Anthony Santander, Austin Hayes, and Ryan Mountcastle all either improved or stayed the same at their elite levels. And Ryan O'Hearn, who was DFA'd by the team in spring training, became the breakout star to their lineup. Their rotation, while still not being the best, drastically improved thanks to the breakouts of Tyler Wells and Kyle Bradish. Bradish posting a 2.83 ERA in 168 innings, looking like the ace in the making. Grayson Rodriguez was solid, albeit underwhelming as a top prospect. Meanwhile, the elite bullpen remained so, with Felix Bautista taking the closer role before going down with Tommy John, but the rest of the bullpen remained elite. Yennier Cano, acquired in the Lopez trade, seemed to take on the magic he had, posting a 2.11 ERA across 72 appearances. Him, along with Cionel Perez, Mike Baumann, and Danny Columbe, all made this a very deep and great bullpen. Yet, almost unprecedented, while all of this success was happening at the major league level, the exact same thing was happening for the minor league prospects. Jackson Holliday, drafted just a year prior, made it all the way up to AAA and became the best prospect in all of baseball. Colton Cowser and Jordan Westburg both posted an OPS higher than 930 in AAA, and Joey Ortiz, Connor Norby, and Kobe Mayo were all solid contributors reaching in the upper levels of the minor leagues. On the pitching side, DL Hall and Grayson Rodriguez shined enough to warrant major league call-ups, and Cade Pavich pitched 126 innings to showcase his long-term potential as a starter. Therefore, despite losing a ton of prospects to graduation over these past couple of years, their farm system as a whole actually improved, thanks to the breakout developments of multiple top prospects moving through the system, as well as the selection of Enrique Bradfield Jr., who I was very high on going into the draft process. Ultimately, though, it was their lack of starting pitching that caused their downfall in the playoffs, getting swept by the Rangers in the ALDS, giving up 21 runs in those 3 games. They tried to address the issue with a Jack Flaherty trade, but he was underwhelming in his time with the Orioles, and ultimately the Orioles had to go home with a sour taste in their mouth, but still with optimism thanks to that elite-level farm system and young talent on the major league team. And now that the Orioles and their fans have gotten a taste, they are hungry, and what once were playoff aspirations had turned into World Series aspirations. With a new owner midway through the offseason and a historically good and deep farm system, they have both the money and assets to make a big splash in the 2023-2024 offseason, in which they would be fairly aggressive, signing Craig Kimbrell and training for Jonathan Heasley early in the offseason, but the real moves would happen shortly after the ownership change, trading for Brewers ace and Cy Young Award winner Corbin Burns, paying a hefty price in return, and top prospects D.O. Hall, who's been with the organization for a long time, and Joey Ortiz. Burns immediately slotted in as the ace of the staff that is suddenly looking very solid, and although I wish that the Orioles would have signed another arm like Montgomery and Imanaga to truly have an elite level rotation, they do have the young pieces to supplement a good or great rotation. Now, in 2024, things continue to be business as usual. The team is rolling right now, but making the playoffs was already expected, and all eyes will turn to making it far come postseason time, to reward those years where 100 lost seasons were the norm. And although Cedric Mullins has struggled to start the season and Jackson Holliday was underwhelming to begin his MLB career, everyone else really is clicking. Henderson is playing like an MVP, Adley, O'Hearn, and Santander continue to do their thing, Mateo, Cowser, and Mountcastle have taken huge steps forward, but Jordan Westburg really has been their huge improvement for the hitting side. Played sparingly in 2023, Westburg has since hit .292, .348, .510 as the Orioles' primary third baseman, looking like an all-star in the making. On the pitching side, John Means and Dean Kramer being out with Tommy John definitely does sting, but the Orioles have Corbin Burns, who's been pitching like a Cy Young candidate, as well as Kyle Bradish and breakout star Albert Suarez. Meanwhile, Grayson Rodriguez has finally looked like the young ace everyone saw him out to be, and while Cole Irvin has been devastating, adding a couple miles per hour to his fastball. The bullpen does seem to be the weakness for this team if there even is one. Craig Kimbrell has not been the lights-out closer that the team envisioned him to be, although there is still a plethora of pitchers who have been lights out. But overall, this team is extremely solid top-down, and with the best farm system in the game despite all the graduations, they can afford to be aggressive at the trade deadline for any upgrade that they see fit. In conclusion, looking back, organizationally, this team is very balanced. Sure, the majority of their players came from the draft, but they also found smart waiver claims like Jorge Mateo and a Rule 5 selection in Anthony Santander, as well as making some nifty trades for Cole Irvin. Overall, the Orioles must be given credit for sticking through this rebuild through thick and thin. It sounds easy with hindsight about these trades, but going through consistent 100-loss season after 100-loss season only to taste a sliver of success, to just be told that they're not quite there yet, is hard for any franchise to bear. Ultimately, any lesson learned here is to stay course and trust the long-term plan that you've built for yourself. The Lopez tree speaks volumes about how the ideal rebuild should go. Only invest when you know you have a shot at the World Series. Also, the Orioles have an elite development squad, and this should be chased after in order to end a rebuild more effectively. Trades help, sure, but look at the Orioles' core pieces. Adley, Gunnar, Westburg, Cowser, and Rodriguez were all drafted and developed by the organization. And even pieces like Joey Ortiz and D.L. Hall, which were used to get another asset in Burns, were also drafted by the organization. The best way to sustainably end a rebuild is through the draft, and the Orioles are all the better for it, looking to compete now and the next decade plus. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, if you enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below new video ideas. Also, comment down below a team you would like me to break down for a team breakdowns. But right now, I think I'm going to focus on another draft video, and then I'll maybe do some trade videos, but we'll see which works, and we'll see you guys in the next one.